I had thought of using an epigraph for the Robert Lowell poems, which in effect is appropriate to Anthony Hecht and most appropriate of all, I think, to John Berryman. This is from Freud's Civilization and Its Discontents. And I think he prints it in block capitals, which is something he doesn't usually do. The price we pay for our advance in civilization is a loss of happiness through the heightening of the sense of guilt. And the sense of guilt is there in virtually every poem that Berryman wrote. There also, as his friend Robert Lowell pointed out, are a lot of high spirits. And as many people have noticed, whether they like the humor or not, and I think sometimes it misses fire, there's a lot of humor in Berryman's poems as well. But I think that sense of guilt, a partly inexplicable guilt, is pretty much always with us when we're reading him. He was born in McAlester, Oklahoma, in 1914. He was given the name of John Allen Smith Jr., and his parents moved from McAlester to an even smaller town in Oklahoma, Anadarko, and that was mainly where he grew up until about the age of 10 or 11 when they moved to Tampa, Florida. And in 1926, when Berryman was 11 years old, his father, John Allen Smith Sr., shot himself outside the window of his son's bedroom in the apartment where the family was then living. This is an event that resonates through Berryman's life. And one of the dream songs I've assigned 100 is a tribute to his mother. Um, and the other one that I've assigned that has to do with his parents is 384, which is a sort of curse on his father. Very intense and very uncomfortable to read, but I think a good poem. His
Was
mother,
that
yeah,
Peter? Was that suicide intended as a kind of an aggressive act? I mean, it sounds like it was. No,
one
you
would
don't know.
think so. One would think
Yeah,
so. But at the time, his father was unemployed, and his parents, although they were apparently strict and devout Catholics, were considering a divorce. Berryman's mother wanted a divorce. So those two, conditioning circumstances are there. But I think there couldn't help but be an element of aggression in the way he did it. Uh,
yeah,
I think there often is in suicides. That isn't so uncommon. I think the childish thought of, I'll be dead and then they'll be sorry is something that we never completely outgrow. At any rate, Berryman's mother remarried soon after her first husband's death to a man named John Angus McAlpin Berryman, also a banker, and they moved to New York City, which must have been very different from Anadarko, Oklahoma, or even from Tampa. Berryman went to Columbia University. He was a serious scholar. He said at one point early in his career, I masquerade as a writer. Actually, I am a scholar. And that, of course, has to be taken with a grain of salt. He wasn't just masquerading as a writer, but he had the scholar's habits. Like both he and Lowell were very learned, but Lowell is careless with his learning and fairly often makes careless mistakes. Berryman was much more meticulous. Um, he didn't immediately make much of a dent as a poet. One of his teachers at Columbia was the poet and critic Mark Van Doren, whose Shakespeare criticism I know a little bit and who was a fine critic. I'm not really familiar with his poetry. And he encouraged Berryman's interest in writing poetry. But his second book, the first one that made much of an impression, The Dispossessed, came out in 1948 when he was about 32. So he wasn't precocious in terms of his career. Um, I've assigned four poems from the early books. I don't know in what order they were written or when they were written. I have skipped Homage to Mistress Bradstreet, the first poem that really made Berryman famous, which was published in Partisan Review in 1953 and then as a book in 1956. I have to say, I've never really been convinced by Homage to Mistress Bradstreet. It shows a lot of research on Puritan New England. It shows a very strong sympathy with Anne Bradstreet, more with her as a woman and a Puritan and a pioneer than with her as a poet. Berryman didn't have that high an opinion of her poetry. I used not to either, but I think when she writes on very simple topics, as in the beautiful poem to my dear and loving husband, she often writes very well. When she's trying to be more lofty and more elaborate, and following French models like Du Bartas, I think she writes less well. At any rate, reading a large section of this poem that's in the Norton Anthology of American Literature, I was reminded of a line in one of the Dream songs. Henry became interested in women's bodies. There's nothing wrong with that, but it seems to me that his attempt almost to be Anne Bradstreet while he's writing the poem uh, is a little somehow wrong. Doesn't really convince me. Convinces me of Berryman's interest in her, her body and her soul, and his willingness to imagine her fully, but it doesn't really convince me that he's succeeded in doing that. The first Dream Songs book came out in 1964, but he had been writing these 18-line poems for years. In 1955, he decided to call them Dream Songs. In 64, he published 77 Dream Songs, which won the Pulitzer Prize. In 68, His Toy, His Dream, His Rest, which won the National Book Award. And in 1969, he published all the Dream Songs that he really wanted to publish, 385 of them, simply as the Dream Songs. And that, I think, is really the book to read carefully if you're interested in Berryman. Robert Lowell, in his original review, says, and I think many readers will agree with this, at first, the brain aches and freezes at so much darkness, disorder, and oddness. And he also admits, which was a relief to me, that many of the Dream Songs are unintelligible because I find them unintelligible. But even the unintelligible ones have brilliant moments to them. And I also agree with Lowell when he says the more you read of the Dream Songs, they become more and more enjoyable, and you get into the mood of them. But let's start with the shorter poems that don't belong with the Dream Songs. First, a rather modest one. Well, first the ball song. I think I
Wait
don't
a minute,
know.
I need to go to screen sharing.
Yeah, I don't know how early that is. Yeah, I think you should probably go to screen sharing.
I'm gonna get my coffee.
Okay, the ball poem. What is the boy now who has lost his ball? What is he to do? I saw it go merrily bouncing down the street and then merrily over. There it is in the water. No use to say, oh, there are other balls. An ultimate shaking grief fixes the boy as he stands rigid, trembling, staring down all his young days into the harbor where his ball went. I would not intrude on him. A dime, another ball is worthless. Now he senses first responsibility in a world of possessions. People will take balls. Balls will be lost always, little boy. and no one buys a ball back. Money is external. He is learning, well behind his desperate eyes, the epistemology of loss, how to stand up, knowing what every man must one day know and most know many days, how to stand up, and gradually light returns to the street, a whistle blows, the ball is out of sight. Soon part of me will explore the deep and dark floor of the harbor. I am everywhere. I suffer and move. My mind and my heart move with all that move me, under the water or whistling. I am not a little boy. Not a little boy, but capable of imagining fully what that little boy is feeling. And, virtually all little boys and many little girls play with balls, and there's virtually always this experience of, oh, it's lost. I can't get it back. And it seems to mean so much more than it meant before it went, over the fence and into the woods where you look for half an hour and can't find it, or into the water of the harbor. Incidentally, harbor is underlined in red. That's because Berryman chooses to use English spelling, uh, harbor, Harbor, rather than Harbor. And he does that consistently. And I forgot to mention that in 1938, after graduating from Columbia, he studied at Cambridge. And Lowell said when he first met Berryman, Berryman had something of the manner of a Cambridge Don. Okay, any thoughts about that one? It's a simple poem, but I think a fine one.
He's talking about the epistemology of loss,
Yes, that's the
talking
subject,
about
really.
himself.
Yes. Yeah.
And it gets really grim at the end. Soon part of me will explore the deep and dark floor of the harbor.
Yes.
That is really prescient and terrifying.
Well, the
So
last,
he's
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, so he's taking on the universal role of recognizing the loss of that all people, all young boys and girls experience, which is a pretty deep thing.
Yeah.
But in his case, he lost his father. So I don't
And
think
his
it's
father, yeah.
about losing balls so much. And it's an
Right.
interesting contrast with Elizabeth Bishop's one art. And
Right.
Yeah. There is a definite contrast there. Yeah. Yeah. And they go well together also.
Yeah.
Um, let's move on to The Traveler. Again, a simple and straightforward poem, but a little more puzzling, I think. Um, They pointed me out on the highway and they said, that man has a curious way of holding his head. They pointed me out on the beach. They said, that man will never become as we are, try as he can. They pointed me out at the station, and the guard looked at me twice, thrice, thoughtfully and hard. I took the same train that the others took to the same place. Were it not for that look and those words, we were all of us the same. I studied merely maps. I tried to name the effects of motion on the travelers. I watched the couple I could see, the curse and blessings of that couple, their destination, the deception practiced on them at the station, their courage. When the train stopped and they knew the end of their journey, I descended too. Uh, so the feeling of being an outsider and the feeling that people are looking at you as an outsider. There's a great moment in James Baldwin's novel Giovanni's Room where David, the narrator, realizes that people tend to look at you that way because of the way you look at them. That is sometimes with suspicion or, already a sense of alienation. Be that as it may, he is this kind of outsider, but then he takes the same train the others took. He seems to be trying to blend in, and he seems to be watching that couple, whoever they are, almost as if to know how he's supposed to be himself. but it doesn't seem to work out that way. The curse and blessings of that couple, their destination, that's easy to see. The deception practiced on them at the station, what could that have been? Their courage. Why did they need courage when they get off the train at the railroad station? No answer. But when they descend, he descends. And of course, to watch an unknown couple in this way suggests something like the child watching his parents, but I wouldn't put too much stress on that. Thoughts on that one?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Peter, I think, when I got down to the end with the couple that's having deception practiced on them and they need to be brave, I I just looked it up and he wrote this or was published in 1948. And I'm wondering if there were any feelings of sort of what happened to the Jews in terms of people perhaps who were trying to escape and capture was waiting for them at the end of the ride or whatever.
Yes, I think that's completely plausible. There is a poem called The Black Book, which is quite long, that is pretty much about the fate of the Jews in Europe. So I think it makes sense that that might be on his mind. It's only very faintly suggested, but I think it could be there. Yeah. That was,
Um, when you just mentioned the Black Book, is that a book that he wrote or a poem or
it's a longish poem of which I have read only excerpts. I don't think it's that successful, but it is a serious poem.
because there's a quite an amazing movie called The
Yeah.
Black Book
Yeah.
Yeah,
about
but I
the
think that's
underground in
different.
Belgium.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think that is different. Black books appear from time to time when there are secrets of whatever kind.
Yeah.
So I don't think it takes off from Berryman's
Yeah, that
poem.
is an amazing movie. This poem's like a dream too.
Yeah, it is a dream poem in a way.
This poem made me think about the Doors song, People Are Strange, when
Yeah,
you're a stranger.
That's
yeah,
just exactly what I wrote
Yeah.
down as a note on my poem.
yeah. That's
People
great.
are strange. That's funny.
Yeah. Yeah, the Doors, from time to time, they are really great. And I especially love Riders on the Storm. Into Judas' world we're born. Um,
You
okay.
know, it is odd that human beings, most other animals, if I guess, I don't know most other animals, when they see another being of their species, there's a bit of, um, well, we do this too, but there's a bit of, sniffing,
Mhm.
seeing what they're up to. In other words, trying to determine if this is friend or enemy.
Yeah,
And with human beings, there's kind of an assumption, unless you might be in any enemy territory in a war, that the other person will accept you and not recoil.
yeah,
Um, that it's an underlying unconscious feeling that he is suspicious of or something. In the first three stanzas, he's going, well, they're looking at me, uh, and you can get into that state of mind. But generally, the weird thing is that we don't feel like that. We
hmm
walk into a store and we don't feel like, oh, they're all looking at me.
yeah. But of course, we know exactly what we want in the store. Sometimes we don't know that. Um, there's a poem that Anne wrote that comes from a remark she overheard from a boy on a bus, I think, and I may be getting the remark wrong, but he looks at a man who just came onto the bus and asks his mother, "Is that man a stranger?" And she says, "Yes." And he thinks for a while and says, "I'm a stranger too. We're all strangers." Yeah, there's something to that.
I forgot that poem.
Yeah, for some reason reminded me of Gregor Samsa.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, sure. I mean, that's a very extreme form of it, but yeah.
I know that it's not always productive to take modern knowledge and try to diagnose people in the past, but these comments about looking at the maps and watching people carefully to see how you're supposed to behave reminds me of what used to be called Asperger's. My
Mhm.
my granddaughter, now grandson, is high functioning on the spectrum,
Yeah.
and he told me that it's exhausting for him to always be watching other people, trying to read their faces, trying
Mhm.
to know how they feel, and trying to figure out how you're supposed to behave. So
Wow.
that's what this reminds me of a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely see that. Want to move on to the moon and the night and the men.
Which is such a pretty title.
Yeah, this is definitely a World War II poem. And I think when I first read it, I assumed that Berryman was in the war, but he wasn't. He got married in 1942. He was already 28 that year, so he was above draft age. On the night of the Belgian surrender, the moon rose late, a delayed moon, and a violent moon for the English or the American beholder, the French beholder. It was a cold night. People put on their wraps. The troops were cold, no doubt, despite the calendar. No doubt numbers of refugees coughed, and the sight or sound of some killed others. A cold night. On Outer Drive, there was an accident. A stupid, well-intentioned man turned sharp right, and abruptly he became an angel fingering an unfamiliar harp, or screamed in hell, or was nothing at all. Do not imagine this is unimportant. He was a part of the night, part of the land, part of the bitter and exhausted ground out of which memory grows. Michael and I stared at each other over chess and drank and played and spoke as little as possible and drank and played. The chessmen caught in the European eye. Neither of us, I think, had a free look, although the game was fair. The move one made, it was difficult at last to keep one's mind on. Hurt and unhappy, said the man in London. We said to each other, the time is coming near when none shall have books or music, none his dear, and only a fool will speak aloud his mind. History is approaching a speechless end, as Henry Adams said. Adams was right. All this occurred on the night when Leopold fulfilled the treachery 4 years before begun, or was he well intentioned, more road maker to hell than king? At any rate, the moon came up late and the night was cold. Many men died, although we know the fate of none nor of anyone, and the war goes on, and the moon in the breast of man is cold. Thoughts on that one?
So
Yeah.
he might have been in Cambridge at the point in
Outer
19
Drive.
when Belgium basically fell. If depending, since you said he graduated in 1938, I think from Columbia and went
Yep.
to Cambridge after.
He
And
was he was teaching and a graduate student at Harvard from 1940 to 1943. So I think you got it exactly right. It's
yeah,
Cambridge.
he would have been in Cambridge, and and Dunkirk happened, the evacuation of people. So the Belgians, I think it came as a shock. And
Mhm.
I think the thing that comes through with this is the sort of shock that it's moving fast and it's going to silence us in a way.
Yeah.
I think I think that's the coldness in the chest is the sense of you, the kind of sense that I get from this is the feeling you have when it's so cold and your throat goes sort of cold and it's both fear and and a chill that
Numbness to,
and numbness.
yeah. Yeah.
It, it's powerful, and looking back in hindsight, uh, Henry Adams said whatever he was anticipating, that all of the anticipation, in fact, maybe I don't know whether he wrote this in hindsight, but the anticipation of dire times certainly um, came through.
Mhm.
Well, Adams died in 1918, but he had already written the Education of Henry Adams before the war started, World War One.
Right, but he's quoting this because
Imagine this is from that book, but I don't remember it.
Because Leopold is that King Leopold.
Leopold is the king of the Belgians,
But what's
and
his treachery?
Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands escaped to England and was a kind of rallying point for those Dutch who wanted to resist. Leopold surrendered.
Oh,
And I don't know that that could really be called treachery, but I don't know the extent to which he was ready to collaborate with the Nazis. Um, what Berryman implies is that he was.
Yeah, I don't think that's right. I think Leopold realized his country would have been completely devastated. He had no defense. He had to surrender, otherwise they would have bombed it to,
yeah,
No,
oblivion.
I
yeah.
agree with
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
He had to give up. But
yeah,
Wilhelmina did not attempt to
yeah,
make the Netherlands fight on against Germany. She
yeah,
just left the country and became a symbol of resistance. And I assume Leopold stayed.
yeah.
Uh, and fairly or not, Berryman makes him a symbol of collaboration.
Yeah, and I think you could project one, we're all kind of guessing at people's, you know,
Mhm.
what their intentions are or their actions are and so on. But I mean, it's I like the way that where they jump from Belgium to the chess match with
Yeah,
the recognition that the world goes on in different places at the same time. I thought that was a nice piece where he does that.
yeah. And chess is a war game. A war is somewhat like chess, but there's a huge difference. Yeah. Um, how about the poet's final instructions? Um, unless someone has something more to say about this one.
Oh, that one.
Yeah,
Well, you better read it.
I will read it. Um, you notice in the first line that made up word suicide. I think what we found on the internet was that it had been corrected to suicided, but that's not what it says, though that is implied. Dog
Hmm.
tired, suicide, will now my body down near Cedar Avenue in Minneap when my crime comes. I am blazing with hope. Do me glory, come the whole way across town. I couldn't rest from hell just anywhere in commonplaces, quiring and strange my pall. I might not lie still in the waste of St. Paul or buy Dad's root beer. Good signs I forgive. Drop here with honor due, my trunk and brain among the passioning of my countrymen, unable to read, rich, proud of their tags, and proud of me. Assemble all my bags, bury me in a hole, and give a cheer near Cedar on Lake Street, where the used cars live. Suicide is one of those Joycean puns that Berryman often goes in for, and I think this one works quite well. Sui is of oneself in Latin, so suicired would be being one's own father. The word suggests suicide, of course, and is meant to.
So he was
And it
fired by a
also, he
suicide.
was sired by a suicide. So it has at least three different distinct meanings. Um, it's a strangely good-humored poem for a poem that is something like a suicide note. There is tolerance in it. There's also bitterness. When my crime comes, I think is a great variation on when my time comes. The sentence that I always tend to forget in this poem is "I am blazing with hope," because it's so incongruous. Um, and then drop here with honor due my trunk and brain. Drop here my trunk and brain is about as callous as you can get, referring to a dead body, even your own, but with honor due. And he means that as well. And then I think the picture of his countrymen is brilliant. These are the people of Minneapolis, where he taught at the University of Minnesota. His friend Alan Tate got him the job. He taught there from 1955 till his death in 1972. Unable to read, rich, proud of their tags, I assume their labels, and proud of me, but unable to read. So what good is their pride in a poet to the poet? And then back to Cedar on Lake Street, which is, I assume that's where the graveyard is, and it's not very far from the bridge that he jumped off in January 1972.
This is really picking up the language of the dream songs.
Yes, he's moving toward the language of the dream songs, but it's still pretty clear. I think what is most like the dream songs is the combination of anguish and a kind of wild hilarity, which is one of the things attractive about the dream songs, sometimes also exhausting about them.
When was this one written?
I wish I knew, but I don't know. Certainly after he was teaching in Minneapolis, so it couldn't have been before 1955, but exactly when, I don't know.
Well, it also has the strange diction of the dream songs.
Yes.
We'll nail my body down near Cedar Avenue in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
do me glory.
Yeah, definitely.
Good signs I forget.
The proud of me line,
Mhm.
I was wondering the same thing when it was written. Was he famous? Were they proud of him? They could brag about their professor being famous, or
Yes,
is that
it was
okay?
probably after 1956 when Homage to Mistress Bradstreet was published in book form.
I
So he
can't.
probably was famous.
I can think of one of Anne's students or yours being proud of you, but I can't think of one of my students being proud of me. Not anybody to brag about. So I have to assume it has something to do with there being his being established and well known.
Wait,
Why
when
Yeah,
did
else would
Pulitzer?
he got the Pulitzer in 1965, so he
Later?
hadn't yet got it.
Okay.
He was also apparently a very enthusiastic and dedicated teacher. I mean, I know Lowell was a good teacher because I went to a few of his classes in 1977. But at secondhand, what I read about Berryman suggests that he didn't necessarily feel close to his students, but he really loved teaching and got very much got into it. Okay, let's turn to
Well, to
the
me, this whole stanza is saying, that he's got this fame, but the people who he's famous with, he doesn't have a very high opinion of, which puts him in a pretty sad place. He's honored by only by people he thinks are worthless.
I don't know if he quite thinks they're worthless. He thinks they're illiterate. Um,
Yeah.
it seems to me he's capable of recognizing their humanity and feeling at least somewhat good about the fact that they're proud of him, but at the same time frustrated because they don't really read and they certainly don't read serious poetry. And,
Mhm.
this is, if anything, a bigger problem in the United States now than it used to be, partly hidden by the fact that there are so many creative writing courses, so many published poets, so many aspiring poets, and so on. But there is still that gulf between what most of the people of our country consider to matter and what poets and readers of poetry consider to matter in that way.
I for a long time played with a Cody band, and I used to and our of course our fans were they loved us and everything, but I always referred to the performances is swine before swine.
That's great. Oh my God.
Okay, can't beat that. Want to turn to the dream songs?
Why not?
I love
Okay.
this one.
These are not meant to be records of actual dreams, though once in a while a dream will appear in them. But they are meant to have, I think, the surface absurdity and inconsequentiality of dreams with something going on beneath the surface that involves often a lot of feeling. Huffy Henry hid the day, unappeasable Henry sulked. I see his point, a trying to put things over. It was the thought they could do it made Henry wicked and away, but he should have come out and talked. All the world like a woolen lover once did seem on Henry's side. Then came a departure. Thereafter nothing fell out as it might or ought. I don't see how Henry, pride open for all the world to see, survived. What he has now to say is a long wonder the world can bear and be. Once in a sycamore I was glad all at the top and sang. Hard on the land wears the strong sea, and empty grows every bed. Okay, a word on Henry. Occasionally in the early dream songs, he's called Henry House. I don't know why, but then Berryman drops that. Often he is jokingly called Henry Pussycat, but mostly he's just Henry, and he's obviously an alter ego of the poet. Berryman was a little bit coy about that. He said, well, Henry is a lot like me. He's a white, middle-aged American. He's a poet. He's a teacher, this, that, and the other. But he's also different from me. For example, I pay income tax, but Henry doesn't pay income tax. So the difference is not very striking, and the resemblance is very striking. But as Lowell pointed out, these poems would have been really virtually impossible to write in the first person.
Yeah.
They use the first person quite often, and you notice that this one, like many of the others, goes from third person to first person. Once what he has now to say is a long wonder the world can bear and be. Once in a sycamore, I was glad. So, in a sense, it is true that he has dropped the mask of the lyric poet. Even his persona is really himself. But it's as if there's a mask and he's constantly putting it on and taking it off, switching around. And the transitions in this one, I think, are easy to follow. And some of the dream songs, they're virtually impossible to follow. Um, I'm a little puzzled by a woolen lover, but it might be, woolen clothing that you're wearing that is warm and comforting. And that last stanza, I
Yeah.
think, is really beautiful and very, very simple. That sense of joy, having climbed a tree and looking out at the world from the top of the tree. And then the last two lines, which say nothing new, but say it in a very powerful way and can't be contradicted. Hard on the land where's the strong sea, and empty grows every bed.
So, isn't there something in the New England Primer about sycamore? Zechariah he did climb a tree, the Lord to see.
Yes, yes, that's in the alphabet thing. Yeah,
So I bet you he's referring to that there.
yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I hadn't even thought of it, but it makes perfect sense.
Zacchaeus, he did climb a tree, his Lord to see.
Exactly, yeah.
So something I've set to music.
Yeah,
Oh, cool.
that's very cool.
I found it in a book of paleontology. It describes a flying dinosaur.
A book of paleontology?
That's great.
Yes,
Wow.
Percy Raymond of Harvard,
Wow.
Huh.
Ancient Life.
Yeah.
In the first stanza, the line, "It was the thought they could do it made Henry wicked and away."
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that it was the thought that they thought, not that he thought. So it makes me wonder: is he and Henry, or is they everybody? Because this is a universal thing that people do to try to put things over.
I think there's a certain arrogance in what he's saying. To think that they thought they could do it, whatever it was, maybe write poetry, made Henry wicked in a way.
But also, he was institutionalized sometimes, wasn't he?
Yes, he
So, see, I
spent.
think he's referring to that too. They thought they could make him well. They thought they could put him
Oh,
away.
okay. That makes sense too. That makes sense too. And it makes more sense out of, but he should have come out and talked.
Hmm.
Because sulking about people's, belief that they're better poets than they are doesn't really fit with, but he should have come out and talked. Whereas, hospitalizations, both for physical illnesses and for mental illnesses in Berryman's case, it does make sense.
And see, that refers to also a breakdown. There came a departure. Thereafter, nothing fell out as it might or ought.
Hmm.
I don't see how Henry, pried open for all the world to see, survived.
Right, right.
That's, to me, obviously talking about psychological intervention,
Yes,
psychiatric intervention, let's say.
I agree. I agree. I had missed that, but it's there. You want to move to 4? I have to confess that I wanted to do this poem, but I couldn't immediately find it. I was looking too far on in the book. And I was a little worried at Anne's reaction to the poem. And then she said, "Don't you want to do this one?" And I was very happy. It's
Hysterical.
a fresh poem, but it is, I think, a wonderful one. And here we get one of the first appearances of the interlocutor who speaks in a form of African American dialect. And it seems that Berryman occasionally imagined this person as being an other person named Sir Bones, and Sir Bones suggests that he is death personified. But more often, Sir Bones is Henry himself, but a kind of, wise mentor who is trying to keep Henry in line. But he always speaks in this dialect, and some of the poems have a sort of fantasy that they're two minstrels in blackface in a minstrel show. At one point, there's a reference to whiteface also. Filling her compact and delicious body with chicken paprika, she glanced at me twice. Fainting with interest, I hungered back. And only the fact of her husband and 4 other people kept me from springing on her or falling at her little feet and crying, "You are the hottest one for years of night Henry's dazed eyes have enjoyed. Brilliance." I advanced upon, despairing, my spumoni. Sir Bones is stuffed the world with feeding girls. Black hair, complexion Latin, jeweled eyes downcast. The slob beside her feasts. What wonders is she sitting on over there? The restaurant buzzes. She might as well be on Mars. Where did it all go wrong? There ought to be a law against Henry. Mr. Bones, there is. Okay.
It's hysterically funny.
Yeah, I do too.
I love, I advanced upon despairing my spumoni.
Yeah, I'll never think of Spumoni again in the same way.
Yeah.
But metrically, it's so pleasing too. I advanced upon despairing my spumoni, you
Yeah.
know? And it's so much funnier than I advanced upon my spumoni in despair or something
Yeah.
like that, you know,
Or despairing, I advanced upon by
which
Spumoni.
is totally awkward. Yeah.
It's as if he advances and then realizes he's in despair as he's eating.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think it's a wonderful poem. The last two lines are great, you know.
Well,
Very.
And
oh,
the transition there, where did it all go wrong? That sounds as if he's saying, how come I'm not in a position to seduce this woman as I want to? But then there ought to be a law against Henry, suggests what I want to do is wrong, actually, though I still want to do it. And then the reminder that there is a law against Henry.
Leslie wanted to say something.
yeah,
Yeah,
I was just going to say Mr. Bones's typical minstrel show
right.
interlocutor is that, I mean, some of this
Yeah.
sounds, that's who we are here, right? It's not just bones like death.
No,
No,
there's
Bones.
the minstrel show character, but Berryman himself said at one point that Bones was connected to person Death with a capital D, Mr. Death.
But that's why we've got the de-world with feeding girls language, right? I mean, it's supposed to be an
Right.
imitation of Black
Right.
diction.
Yeah,
Right.
it is. It is.
Okay.
Sound is gone. How
Okay.
weird.
Um,
I'm not
oh,
hearing you, Peter.
Peter, you're mute.
you're mute, Peter.
You muted
I
me.
muted him. Sorry.
I'm not sure what we need to go back
It's
to,
happening
but
to all of us.
what I had to say wasn't that important. Um,
Thanks, Anne.
Yeah.
yeah,
I've been trying to for a long time.
I know every spouse's dream is
all
a
through
mute
the
button.
class. Um, anyway, that the reversal of the syntax makes it much better than if it were the world is stuffed with feeding girls. And I think the most obvious meaning is that all over the world there are girls eating, but it also suggests somehow that the world is doing this over and over and over again and is kind of stuffed with it. Okay. Berryman was married three times. His first wife, Eileen Simpson, to whom he was married from 1942 to 1956, wrote a very interesting book called Poets in Their Youth, which has Berryman, Randall Jarrell, Robert Lowell, Richard Blackmer, a lot of that literary circle in it. And it's not a particularly happy book, but it too has a definite sense of humor. And of course, it's alluding to the Wordsworth couplet in Resolution and Independence. We poets in our youth begin in gladness, but thereof come in the end despondency and madness. Um, anyway, want to move on to 14 and 29?
Before we do,
Yeah.
that was that Wordsworth you just quoted?
Yes. That's from Resolution and Independence, the poem where he is in despondency and he meets the leech gatherer, and the leech gatherer gives him strength to go on.
Is anybody here despondent? I
Not at the
we
moment.
we read about this. I just remember reading many things about the tragedies of life and the tragedies of age,
Mhm.
particularly old age, and I'm not feeling it. I'm just kind of wondering, is that some kind of myth? Is it like the myth of the suffering artist, that the suffering people in old age? I just can't believe I made it this far, and don't I'm not blind, and I don't have any. I'm not imprisoned.
Yeah. I think
You're
it
just
will.
really lucky, Tony.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am.
Well,
I know.
no,
I
that
absolutely.
way. In Wordsworth, it completes a stanza in which he remembers Thomas Chatterton, who killed himself at the age of 17 because his plagiarisms had been found out. and Robert Burns, who died, though not of drink, as is sometimes said, at the age of 37. So if you get the whole stanza, I think Wordsworth isn't saying anything as morbid as that might seem, but he is talking about a tragedy of other young poets besides these two who began with so much joy and hope, and then in their cases died young. I thought of Chatterton, the marvelous boy, the sleepless soul that perished in his pride, of him who walked in glory and in joy, following his plow along the mountainside. By our own spirits are we deified. We poets in our youth begin in gladness, but thereof come in the end despondency and madness. So it isn't so much about old age as about the tendency of poets to die young or to self-destruct.
Well, Wordsworth has that's another one of those weird things. Wordsworth wrote Intimations of Immortality before
Mhm.
he was an old man, and
Yeah.
he was already despairing that he'd lost,
Mhm.
the splendor in the grass.
I'm
Yeah.
despondent now that having Peter recite that from memory, that makes me despondent.
I know. Peter's really strange and strangely able to do that. It's really something. Uh, but isn't
Wordsworth, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. Well, I was just gonna say, isn't it kind of a trope in literature? This horrible, terrible despair in old age, or just in life in general.
I think it's more than a trope. It's part of human experience. But, Wordsworth, I think, had a very strongly positive attitude toward life. If you read a lot of Wordsworth, these lines will not loom larger than they should. But there is one very unusual thing about Wordsworth. He was one of the greatest English poets, but after the age of 37, 35 or so, he wrote very little outstanding poetry. And in his autobiographical poem, The Prelude, of which he had finished a version when he was 35, but which was published only posthumously because that's the way he wanted it. At one point, he says, I see by glimpses now, when age comes on, may scarcely see at all. And when he says see, he's talking about vision. He's not just talking about, eyesight. And I think he had that premonition that the inspiration that was with him for so much of his youth was departing. And that is a sad thing about Wordsworth, although there are many happy and affirmative things about him. Um, yeah.
I would have to say that we have been living in the last 75 years or so an extraordinary bubble
Mm,
of privilege,
yeah.
and there are, in North America, not so necessarily in other parts of the world, who would be aghast at the idea that, you know, we're just sort of floating along.
Yes, that's true. Um, I had a professor of the history of religion, Wilfred Cantwell Smith, who gave a lecture once on the Buddhist concept of life as dukkha or misery or suffering. And he said, I don't like to say this, but this may be the only lecture some of you will ever remember. Um, it's
Robert
not the
Aitken,
only lecture of his that I remember, but I do remember it. And he
Rob,
also said specifically, we in the West have been living in exactly what Douglas was talking about, a relatively privileged bubble in which happiness is thought of as something we ought to have. And most of the world has not been in that bubble, and we may not be able to stay in it. So,
and
yeah.
Robert Aitken translates the suffering of dukkha as anxiety.
Mhm. Yeah. Since I don't know Sanskrit, I can't tell you, but it seems like suffering is at least the most general term for it. Okay. I don't think we have time for both of these next dream songs, which are among the very best. But maybe we can go through Dream Song 14 and leave 29 for Thursday. This is one of the most famous ones, and I think with good reason. And again, it's writing about something that is painful, but there's a lot of humor in it, and the humor is not an added touch, but intrinsic to what's being said. Life, friends, is boring. We must not say so. After all, the sky flashes, the great sea yearns, we ourselves flash and yearn. And moreover, my mother told me as a boy, repeatingly, ever to confess you're bored means you have no inner resources. I conclude now I have no inner resources because I am heavy bored. Peoples bore me. Literature bores me, especially great literature. Henry bores me, gripes and gripes as bad as Achilles, who loves people and valiant art, which bores me. And the tranquil hills and gin seem like a drag. And somehow a dog has taken itself and its tail considerably away over mountains or sea or sky, leaving behind me, wag. Um, so the dog has gone away and left behind Berryman, who is a wag, that is a jokester. But also the dog has gone away, leaving behind not his tail, but the wag of his tail, like the Cheshire Cat in Alice in Wonderland, who disappears,
Yeah.
leaving only its grin. Um, and there he is, the wag of the dog's tail, but that's all. It's a wonderful poem, and partly because after that flat statement, life, friends, is boring, and we must not say so, which all of us, and I am rarely bored, but I think all of us immediately react to that. Yes, I know what he means. After all, the sky flashes, the great sea yearns, we ourselves flash and yearn. He's not trying to make the world small. He's not trying to make human beings small. After all, we flash and yearn. But he is saying there is a mood in which that doesn't really matter at all.
I think
And
this is one of the funniest poems I've ever read.
me too.
And I love things like the line break, ever to confess your bored means you have no inner resources, capitalized, you know. It's
Yeah.
just really funny.
I love the way he capitalizes it in that line and then not in the next
Yeah,
line
I know.
because it's not his mother talking anymore.
Peoples bore me.
Yeah.
You know, it's just so much funnier than if it were like totally standard English.
Yeah.
And I mean, to start a poem with the line, Life, friends, is boring. That's the only poem that anybody ever wrote that begins that way, you know? There's like a billion poems that begin, enjoy the pleasures of spring, or I love you so much, or something like that, you know, but life, friends, is boring. We must not say so. Oh my God. It's hysterical.
Baudelaire ends his prefatory poem to Les Fleurs du Mal with ennui and turns to the reader and says, "You know what I mean."
Yeah.
But he wouldn't begin it that way.
Yeah.
It's a very daring thing to begin it that way. Okay.
Henry bores me.
Yeah, Douglas.
It reminds me of I think it's Jack Cornford wrote a book, After Enlightenment, Folding the Laundry.
That's great.
Yeah. Very zen.
Yeah.
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 Sweet. We should stop.
Yeah, we should stop. So I'll start with 29, which I think might be the greatest of all the dream songs
Which one's 29?
on Thursday. Okay. Bye.
Sounds good.
Hey, you
Bye-bye.
guys, you're not
Go ahead.
boring. You're not boring. Take care.
All right, folks.
Ciao.